Why am I always in career crisis? Well, it all boils down to this. I'm a bad planner. I'm pretty sure I was the person Yogi Berra had in mind when he said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. That lack of foresight led to my first career faux pas. You see, as a brand new freshman at the University of Oregon, I was assigned an English major as my advisor. Now, Professor Boswell was there to advise me on my major. Advice I took as objective. He said to me, young lady, you can do anything with an English degree. This from a man who taught 17th century literature. So I said, okay, and I majored in English. And I had a groovy time doing so until about my junior year, when it dawned on me that in the 1970s economy, for a liberal arts major, anything pretty much amounted to waiting table, driving taxi, or teaching high school. So I reluctantly did my high school student teaching, during which my supervising teacher said, look, here is the key to survival. Always act confident. And so, on the very first day of my teaching career, I stood in my little bathroom before the mirror, practicing. Hello, class. I'm Miss Johnson. I'll be your teacher. Get it? And that worked really well in my bathroom. Now, when confronted with a sea of squirming sophomores, this is what I said. Hi, class. I'm Miss Johnson. I'll be your teacher this year. Okay. They ate me alive. And it went downhill from there. After 3 years of putting up with spitwads and slack faces, I decided I should try something more stimulating for me. I went back to the University of Oregon, but this time to major in journalism. I would be a magazine writer for the likes of Rolling Stone, The New Yorker. I would change the world. Well, that fantasy came to a screeching halt one day in the halls of the J School when the broadcast professor approached me and said, Janice, there's a new TV news director in town. He's looking to hire a young woman. I think you should apply. And I said, okay. Now, I had absolutely no business in television news. Number one, I did not own, nor had I ever owned a television. Number two, the last TV newscast I had watched was in black and white, and the male anchor was smoking on set. Just to put that in perspective. So I applied. And for some unknown reason, this new news director hired me. I have no idea why. Let me tell you about him. His name was Bill. He was kind of youngish, but he had this shock of steely gray hair, wolf-like eyes, and he stormed around that newsroom in an ankle-length leather coat, sucking the air out of every room he entered. Now, he had been a hotshot TV reporter from Los Angeles, but he'd been fired. And I am not making this up. He was fired because he did not make people's palms sweat enough. True. Back in the 70s, that is one way that TV consultants were measuring how well an anchor or a reporter excited an audience. Well, Bill did not make the focus group's palms sweat enough. He made me and everyone else sweat aplenty. He started me off writing news copy part-time, and that was fine. Except one day he called me at home and said, Janice, come in early and dress nice. Okay. So I came in. He said he informed me that I was going to be doing the weather on the 11 o'clock news starting that evening. I was going to be trained by Cicely. Cicely was the 5 o'clock anchor / weather girl. Cicely had 15 minutes to train me. We went on to the set. She stood there like this while I practiced. Now, Cicely was not a meteorologist, but she had mastered the art of looking cute and perky at the weatherboard. A skill I did not pick up on it. So as I practiced, Cicely stood there like this. You're terrible. You're terrible. Finally, she turned on her heel and said, well, I've got to go put on my makeup. And Janice, let me tell you this. You'll never make it in this business. I was not feeling very good about all this. So I sat around the newsroom sweating bullets, waiting until 10 o'clock rolled around when I was to call the National Weather Service and get an updated weather map. Oh my God. This poor meteorologist might as well have been trying to teach me to knit over the phone as to draw a map of anything. Draw an occluded front, he said right off the bat. Huh? I said. I drew something after 30 agonizing minutes that looked something like a dragon with blisters on its stomach. I don't think that's what he had in mind. But I transferred this little monstrosity onto a big plastic weatherboard. Now, I do not know what I said or did during that weather forecast, but I do remember this. I prayed throughout that meteorologist was not watching. Because I know that if he'd seen what I had drawn on the weatherboard, he would have tried to blind himself. Well, to say I was bad at doing the weather would be a compliment. It went on for 2 weeks, embarrassing, horrible, and finally Bill pulled me aside and we both decided I should spend more time getting my master's degree. And so I left the station. But something had happened in that newsroom that I had not expected. I had fallen in love. Not with Bill, no, but with TV news. And I vowed that as soon as I got my degree, that I would nab the next reporter job at the other station in town. And I did just that. You're probably thinking, wow, she got it together. Wrong. Remember the elephant? So I came in, I've been there about a month at KBAL as a reporter. It was a sunny, bright day, I still remember it well. I came walking into the station, feeling good and looking good. I had just got myself a new tight, short polyester dress, very 70s, with my heels. I was looking good and feeling good, and I was expecting to be sent out on the lead story of the day. But before I could utter a breath, in came into the newsroom, the sales manager from downstairs, yelling at the top of his lungs at the assignment editor. Where is that news for you? Said you'd have him out to the blah, 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 Circus Vargas thing, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing I know, I was in a news car with a photographer on my way to the Oakway Strip Mall to cover an elephant race. Please. I got there, stepped out of the car, and things went downhill from there. The ringmaster came running up to me, gave me this once-over, and went, nice riding clothes. What? He said, you'll be riding Tina over there, pointing to the only elephant in the parking lot without a rider. And I said, excuse me, I am a reporter, I'm here to cover the race. And he said, sweetheart, they sent you here to ride. We're taking off in 2 minutes. And I was just about ready to tell him what for and get back in that news car and drive back to the station when I remembered the words that my new boss had told me when he hired me. Johnson, if you want to keep this job, you come back with every story you're assigned. Do you understand? Or else. I couldn't afford another or else in my life. So I walked, minced really, in my heels over to Tina. And I got by her side. She reared back and looked at me and with this wild eye, a look that I interpreted at the time as, you're going to fall off and die. And I got frightened, really frightened. I was trembling as she knelt and I crawled over her neck. I grabbed onto the harness. I'm shaking. And I've got my knees firmly glued together. My legs are out like a teeter-totter. She stood up, and I'm thinking, this is not a safe or stable position for riding. But I prayed that Tina was old and slow and maybe couldn't run. And then I realized, oh my God, this race is rigged. I'm the only one here with a TV camera. I have the fast elephant. And that is in fact the case. When the gun fired, Tina took off like a shot. My legs went straight up in the air, giving a new meaning to the term news splash. At this point, I realized I had nothing to hide, and I wanted to live. So I wrapped my legs around her neck. I don't know what happened to the dress, because my eyes were closed. She went forward like a shot, and finally she stopped. I opened my eyes, and the crowd was bursting into cheers. Tina had won the race, and Tina had taught me something. As I stood by her side, shaking like a leaf, holding my trophy, I looked over and I watched the trainer attach the rope to her harness and start to lead her away. And then she stopped, and she turned and looked at me, and I could have sworn she winked at me. And I know for a fact, if Tina could talk, she would have said this: "Hey girl, it's about time you take the reins and start winning your own races."
Thank you, Janice. That was very hilarious. You know, I took a meteorology class. I know what an occluded front is, and I think that's a really good description of it. Dragon belly with, yeah. So, you know, of course, I forgot things. My mother-in-law reminded me. She's sitting right next to me. I've got to introduce myself. I'm Blaine Ross. I'm on the Art of the Story committee. I've been on it for 6 years, and so there's a number of us on the committee from libraries all over the county, so I'm part of the committee, so that's who I am, and I work here at Beaverton Library. Thank you, Karen, for reminding me to introduce myself. And I also have another confession to make. I'm filming this, but I forgot to press play, and so, but the good thing is, it doesn't have me yammering on at the beginning, so we missed like the first 10 seconds of Janet's story, but hopefully I can dub that in from the stream, which does seem to be working, so it is recording it if nothing else, so I thought I could make fun of myself, so. At least the lens cap is off the camera, so. Okay, so one other thing I forgot to mention, these are timed stories within they're supposed to be around 10 minutes. We do have a noisemaker if the tellers go on too long, but they've all assured me they're going to stay within that limit, so don't be surprised. Don't be checking your watches to make sure they're in that 10-minute time range, because they may run over a minute or two, but it's all okay. None of them are in it for the money. Just so you know, I don't know if you're aware, they all get $50 for being here, and some of them didn't even know that. They opened up their, oh, I get money for this? They're not in it for the money. The winner will receive $100. And this is all money that comes from the Friends of the Beaverton City Library. And then they will come back and tell a story next week at the finale. So with that in mind, our next teller is Brian Belafonte. And this guy has been trouble from the start. He asked me if he could be a teller. I said, sure, and he sent me some information. And then when I needed his picture, he sent me a picture that wasn't that great, and it was the wrong format or something, and I sent it back. And so he sent me another picture, and that was one of Brad Pitt. So we didn't accept Brad Pitt either. It was a good try, but I knew that was not him. So that's how we got the picture with the chickens on his head. So, he is, well, I think he's dabbling in real estate right now, but he's been a writer and director. And I know he has a website. I don't know if he might mention it, but I think it's called, is it 60 Second Director? Oh, 60 Second Director, yeah. He's got a lot of ads on there. They're pretty funny. If you get a chance, you might want to check them out. So, Anyway, without further ado, please welcome to the stage Brian Belafonte. Make sure the mic is the right height. Yeah, yeah. That's all
So, back behind the high school that I went to, there was a ditch. And in the ditch, there was an alligator. We called him Ron. And we used to throw our leftovers from lunch to him. And in exchange, he kind of left us alone. The alligator's full name was Ron Choidasoy, and how that name came about was a bunch of my buddies from Honor Society and me thought it would be really fun to register a fake student for some years. So we took the letters from the words Honor Society and we jumped them up, and Ron Choidasoy was born. And it was awesome. Every class we were in, the teachers would call out Ron Choidasoy and look around because nobody said here. And then 3 weeks and 2 days into the year, it stopped. Every single class, the name was totally expunged. And I took that as a personal affront. And I dedicated myself to ensuring that the name Ron Choidasoy would live. So a couple of weeks later, when somebody painted the words, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," above the entrance to the school, word got around that it must have been Ron Choidasoy. And a couple weeks after that, when somebody nabbed a for sale sign off the lawn of one of the houses in the neighborhood and stuck it in front of the school. Yep, Ron Choidasoy. And a couple weeks after that, somebody went to the local paper and put an ad in the real estate section offering the school for sale for the princely sum of $73. The name on the order, Ron Choidasoy. So of course we called the alligator Ron Choidasoy, and like I said, we weren't really afraid of it. What we were afraid of were the fire ants. Alligator? Fire ant. The thing about fire ants, though, is they're small, but they are mean. One of them bites you, and you get this welt. It's like the size of a Necco wafer. And it itches and it burns at the same time. The more you scratch it, the more it itches and the more it burns. And the thing is, it's never just one of them that bites you. It's 87,000 of them. They do these sneak attacks where they climb up all your body simultaneously, and then at some secret signal, they all start biting you. And if that happens, you have about 4 seconds to find water to jump into. And like I said, Ron Choidasoy lived in a ditch. We heard stories about cows that wandered too close to fire ant mounds and were reduced to a pile of bones in a matter of minutes. And our school grounds were just littered with these fire ant mounds. I used to stare out the window of my 5th period science class at the fire ant mounds, and this was weird. Not that I was the only one who was scared of them, but it was weird because my 5th period teacher, Miss Taylor. Remember Catherine Smith, the Charlie's Angel with the long hair? That was Miss Taylor. She was gorgeous. Most of the guys in the class, and it was all guys in class, were there not because they were interested in physics, I mean, other than, friction. I remember sitting there staring out the window at the fire ant mounds, and there were a lot of them, and vaguely becoming aware that Miss Taylor was calling my name for probably the 7th or 8th time. Brian! Turn from the window, huh? Which planet? Which planet what? Which planet do you want to plot the orbit of, Jupiter or Saturn? I swear it just came out. I said, I'd rather plot Uranus. Yeah, it's funny how opportunity presents itself. I was given the opportunity to sit in the waiting area outside the principal's office during fifth period for the rest of the year. Which actually was pretty cool, because from the waiting area outside the principal's office, I had a different view of the school grounds and all the fire ant mounds on it. And from there, I could see that while there were fire ant mounds everywhere, the fire ants didn't build mounds under the Brazilian pepper trees. And I know what you're thinking. Duh, Brazilian pepper trees are poisonous. Everyone knows that. Yes, they are. And everyone does know that. But hey, oleanders are poisonous too. And the fire ants built their mounds under them. Yeah. I'm going to school where the perimeter is poisonous foliage. The school grounds are a minefield of land piranhas. And we have a 9-foot-long prehistoric alpha predator in the ditch. I grew up in Florida. Well, you know me. I grabbed some leaves from the Brazilian pepper tree and took them home, put them in the blender with some alcohol and ground it all up, and then brought it back to school. And the next day I poured it on one of the fire ant mounds to see what would happen. And what happened is that all the fire ants left. By the next day, it was empty. Now that was cool. And then I kind of forgot about it. Not really. So I'm sitting in fifth period at the waiting area outside of the principal's office a couple days later. And who should come in but Mr. Lighthouse, the other science teacher. And he wants to see the principal. The principal's busy, so he has to hang out with me. He says, "What's going on?" And I mentioned the Brazilian pepper trees and the fire ants. And for some strange reason, I neglected to give the credit to Ron Choi Soy. He gets this weird look on his face, and he jumps up and he barges into the principal's office. And about 2 minutes later, he comes back out with his weird grin on his face. And he grabs my hand and he says, "Come with me." And the only other science class that's going on during fifth period is the science research class, where all the smart kids are doing the projects for the science fair. So he's giving me the VIP tour of the lab, and he's showing me all the Bunsen burners and the Erlenmeyer flasks. And he takes me over to a stool, and it's going to be my stool, and I get to sit on that stool, fifth period, every day for the rest of the year, and create this incredible insecticide. In his mind. I wasn't that into it. He was. He mixed up a batch himself. He took it out to the football field and cleared out 430 fire ant mounds off the football field. First time since 1967 our school could have a football team. Then he sold the patent to BASF for $4 million, and then he started dating Miss Taylor. Did I mind? I had bigger plans. I was going to get into the locked cabinet where Mr. Labbinghouse kept the potassium nitrate. Remember that episode of Star Trek where Captain Kirk fights the Gorn? And they're on this planet, and he finds potassium nitrate and sulfur and carbon, and he mixes them together to make gunpowder that he can vanquish this huge lizard-like creature that's ungainly and totally uncoordinated that can somehow manage to fly a starship. He was my hero, and I was going to be just like him, except I had to get in the locked cabinet. So my plan was to head with fire ants. I'm going to study tornadoes. Here's what I was thinking. In order to study tornadoes, you have to build a tornado chamber. And what good is a tornado chamber if you can't see the tornado, right? And how are you going to see a tornado? Well, you're going to need smoke. And so, Mr. Labbinghouse, I'm just going to need to get into that cabin and get to the potassium nitrate. And he just laughed. He reached into his pocket, he pulled out a pack of unfiltered Camels, and he handed them to him. He said, "Make all the smoke you want." So I did. So my project actually went pretty well at science fair. I ended up getting a 4-year scholarship to college, where I studied math, and then Spanish, and then moved to New York to get into advertising. And after a few years of that, I decided to move to LA and become a director. And then I married an actress, and you know that picture you have in your mind? It's exactly that. every bit as toxic and insecure as you picture. But we had two amazing kids. One of them is wicked smart, totally oblivious, not very social at all, and the other one's been diagnosed as autistic. And we went through a really nasty, disgusting, long divorce. And in that divorce, I had a lot of time to think about high school and what I've learned. And I learned a lot of things. One of them is that reptiles really aren't scary. I mean, if Captain Kirk had just tossed a half-eaten tuna salad sandwich to the Gorn, that episode would have been over before the first commercial. The second one is, if you pay attention, the thing that scares you can make you rich. Third, if you don't pay attention, the thing that scares you is going to make somebody else rich, and then he's going to end up dating your pretty science teacher. And fourth, and probably most important, I was destined to be in real estate. You know, the words over the entryway, what did they do for the property value? I put up the sign, I got the listing, I did the advertising. Oh, did I mention? Ron Choisoy got 6 offers, all over asking.
Thank you, Brian. Do you have your real estate card to hand out to the people here tonight? We'll see Brian later for that. Okay, so our next teller is Maura Doherty. She's from the Bronx originally. She was a Dominican sister, and she's been in a knife fight in the Bronx. She's nodding her head yes, yeah. So yeah, she was a knife fighter in the Bronx, right? She has tangled with the KKK in Tennessee. You might need to step back up to the plate more. Go back. And she has been on The Moth. She's performed at Backbench BDX, and she's performed with the Portland Storytellers Guild. She's very connected to storytelling and very passionate about it. Please welcome to the stage, Maura Doherty.
All of that is true. And I figure I can handle a knife-wielding assailant because I grew up in the Bronx with 4 brothers and 2 sisters. That was 2 sisters. I do know how to count. So, have you ever been really scared? I want you to think about a time when you were really frightened. Now, elephants may come to mind for some of us. But the time I remember being the most frightened was when I got my first professional job as a certified industrial hygienist. No, I was not cleaning teeth. An industrial hygienist is a professional who helps protect workers on the job. There I was, my very first gig as a consultant, climbing a 15-story petroleum tower at 1 in the morning. Nice, right? Years of graduate school had gotten me there. I had studied a year to take that national board certification. And as I climbed that tower, I thought, what have I done? I must be out of my mind. I mean, I needed the job, but I thought when they said you're going to help do some air sampling, I thought, great. I know how the pump runs, it's battery operated, you take these little glass cylinders, you connect it with the tubing. They didn't tell me I'd be up at the top of the tower with a telescoping pole sticking it inside the refinery hydrocracker tower. Oh no, they neglected to say that. So as I climbed and reviewed my life, kind of like what Janice did with the elephant, looking at her and winking, I thought, you've got to get through these 2 weeks. I mean, this is a job. You have debts to pay. get to the top of this tower. So when I got up to the 15th story, there was a catwalk. I grabbed the railing, and I did exactly what Don, the lead person, told me to do. He said, Mark, you look straight out. Don't look down. Here I am, state of Washington. It was not raining. I'm talking Birch Bay, beautiful place. Can't see a thing. It's the middle of the night. I've got that hand railing, and I'm looking out. And I realized two things. One is every tower and process tank is covered in white lights. So it's kind of like an industrial Disneyland without Magic Mountain. And the air stinks. Petrochemicals, gasoline, diesel, benzene, toluene, xylene. I mean, hello. I paid 2 years of graduate school education for this. I must have been out of my mind. Second thing I realized as I clenched that guardrail, I was afraid of heights. This is not the time to find this out. I had never climbed a 15-story tower at 1 a.m. How would I know I was afraid of heights? So I'm shaking, my head's pounding, my stomach is clenching, I'm sweating through my heavy-duty work gloves. Let me tell you, I had on a hard hat, safety glasses, steel-toed boots, and a fluorescent yellow set of coveralls that were Nomex fire retardant, just in case there was a fire. So as I stood there, sweating, the sweat is pouring down my face, and I'm thinking, this is not good. I'm not looking down, but I am in trouble. But I had been living in the Northwest for about 10 years, so I knew exactly what to do as I held onto that railing. I breathed in, I breathed out. I breathed in petrochemicals, I breathed out petrochemicals. And then I turned towards that open hatchway that I would not have to crawl into, but the cleanup crew who was going inside the tank. You know, my job might have been hard, but they had the hardest job of all. They were climbing inside a confined space. I got all my gear out of my backpack, got it set up on the telescoping painter's pole. I thought it was really cool. Took samples in that hatchway, put it all back in my pack, had the glass cylinder all plugged up so none of the air got out, and then proceeded back down the ladder, stopped at every hatchway to pull another sample till I got back to the ground floor level. Yeah, that's how I felt. I worked from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now I thought I deserved a star just to make it through one shift. 6:30 a.m., where am I? Driving my car to the 7-Eleven. I figured I've got to get something to eat. I buy 2 of those cellophane wrapped sandwiches. Talk about toxicity. You know, they're the ones that look like they're fossilized, mystery meat in the middle. I figure I need a little something to eat before I go to bed and something when I wake up before I go back on shift. Really tasty. And I buy a 6-pack of beer. Main course, dessert. I'm ready. So I get to the condo, close all the blinds, trying to think, how am I going to sleep during the day? I eat the sandwich, I pop open a beer, I drink it, finish the sandwich, pop open another beer, you get the picture. By the time my head hits the pillow,